Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 206. I recorded this interview on November 19th, 2019. Thank you to Justin Scott for being on last week or 2 weeks ago. You know, time is a whatever flat circle or something. In any case, the latest Democratic debates are in Atlanta tonight, and I'm wondering about how they ended up in Tyler Perry's studio when he famously wears women's clothing as his most known character and also a super Christian. I consider empathy to be a key characteristic. In the battles of the past month, I would say my empathy was a bit lost, but when one's emotion and dander is up, such things tend to disappear. I didn't have Krista Cox on this week solely because of her David Silverman article, although that was a fine piece of writing. It was her personal story of finding a community, then discovering that a decent chunk of it may not see the world the same way that she does. We discuss favorite celebrity cats, cider versus beer, what a feminist-humanist alliance is, and I swear you're missing out when you do not check out the video version of this week's show. Let's just say intersectionality is smoking a cigarette right now. Let's start the conversation.
Well, you said I couldn't do it, but here it is. Meet Abby, the Olympic tabby.
How'd you get the eyes to move? You paper mache my cat?
Just for the prototype, honey.
The Zachrilege Cast! Krista Cox, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now let's get straight to it. Some shows do not introduce their beverages early, but I will. So we're starting with Three Philosopher, Bourbon Barrel, in a can. I know. Drinking beer out of a can. And that doesn't work out. The official drink of the show of the drink. Good start. Dragon's Milk. Anyway, so what do you have?
Oh, I just have 1 3/4 drunk can of Angry Orchard crisp apple. So I was not, I'm not as prepared as you. So I won't be able to keep up.
Well, the whole point of the show is you'll be doing most of the talking, so you won't have time to drink, but I will. So that's how this whole thing works. So one quick out-of-context quote that we will be getting into during the show tonight. If you need me, I'll be in my bedroom fellating intersectionality. And so can we start by agreeing that as humanists, we are super pro-justice and due process gets us turned on, if we're honest. So let's have a round of not at all sarcastic applause for our favorite atheist, not at all sexual predator, not at all a liar, taking on right-wing talking points for profit, getting his human rights restored by getting a cushy, Knight-Iranic title of ED with the Atheist Alliance International. Woohoo! No. All right. Yeah, golf clap.
That's all I got in me.
That would be David Silverman. So instead of talking about a podcast, we're going to talk about your article. So you sent the atheist Osphere into a tizzy with the article in The Humanist called The Firebrand's New Brand, David Silverman's Return to Atheist Leadership. And you haven't been following me for the last month, you'll know nothing about this, but read this article. You'll get a really good encapsulation of what's going on. So what was the inciting incident that led you to want to write the article?
So I became aware of Silverman's appearance on the Sargon of Akkad podcast. And because I like to torture myself, I listened to the whole thing and found myself furiously taking notes. My husband and I were on a road trip from Toronto. And on the way back, I was listening and taking notes about all the things I had to say about it. And then, gosh, it couldn't have been more than a couple of days later that he was appointed as the executive director of AAI. As I'm on the board of the Feminist Humanist Alliance, and it seems like the exact sort of thing that we should have a public opinion about. And so that was, I got in touch with the people at AHA who print The Humanist, and I said, I want to write a piece on this. And then I did all kinds of really terrible research for it. I had to listen to all sorts of things I wish I didn't hear or know.
Yeah, that's probably true. I give Chris, who's in the chat room as well, he likes to kind of hate watch like Christian movies or like anti-vax type stuff. and it's really tough for me. Like I listened to one interview with Silverman. I got about halfway through and I was like, these people who say they're neutral about him seem like they're pretty much agreeing with him all the way. And what he's saying is, yeah, it's things that we've heard over the past few years, people say, but we haven't heard someone who's been given like atheist leadership. So that's, obviously a disappointing thing. I mean, what really kind of initially connected me with this article was the fact that you kind of talked about your journey, like becoming an atheist and getting involved in atheist groups and how you felt like you had met your people. And then later on you discover, well, maybe some of these people aren't your people and how you have to kind of deal with it. But can you, I guess, piece together, the timeline with his fall from grace and rapid restoration with the Atheist Alliance International position?
So you mean Silverman's timeline?
Yes.
My timeline?
And we'll get to the kind of how the article put together.
Yeah, so just really briefly, I think that Silverman was the president of American Atheists for like 8 years. He was a very public figure. He was on Fox News all the time arguing with Bill O'Reilly. He was memed. So, probably most of the people listening to this know who he is, at least or was in the movement. In April of 2018, American Atheists announced that they were suspending him for an investigation. They didn't specify what it was about. A couple of days later, I think it was just maybe 3 or 6 or something like that days later, he was fired as a president due to loss of confidence was what they said later, because of the thing they were initially investigating. And then these allegations that came out in a BuzzFeed article of sexual misconduct is probably the mildest way to characterize it. Initially, Silverman denied some of the allegations, but definitely apologized for abusing power by sleeping with a student at the Secular Student Alliance conference, I think, who he was aware was seeking a position in the atheist community. He kind of fell off the face of the earth for a while. I think he deactivated social media, and then showed back up a few months ago with some really fresh, shiny rhetoric about how he's not a feminist anymore. His eyes have been opened. He said he'd been red-pilled, or like he kind of questioned, like, have I been red-pilled? It's a little non-committal, I think, but and he went on the Sargon of Akkad podcast and said either said himself or agreed with a lot of really kind of disturbing ideas. That like social justice is a power grab and that it's, really harmful to society and, we're all very woke. So shortly after that, there's been a number of statements too. He's made a lot of posts and tweets and things like that, all along the same kind of lines. And then AAI hired him. And a couple of days after that, they posted a defense of their hiring, essentially, that said that he was entitled, one of his human rights was due process, and that they don't feel like he was granted due process in his initial firing from American Atheists. So they privately investigated the allegations against him and found them all to be false. And except for the one about abusing power, which they said he did that, but he's really, really sorry. So it definitely won't happen again. There were some very victim blaming statements in there. Like part of our investigation found that, one of the people who made allegations was very flirty. So, and that's kind of where we're at.
It all turns out to be like the snake eating its own tail. Like explaining this whole thing might explain why feminism and social justice might be necessary. But is it tough, I guess, when you write an article like this and the story just keeps going? Like you have to stop at a certain point and post it, but the story and the fact that you write the article means you get to be part of the story too. But what was the how long was it kind of putting it together? And did you just say, okay, I'm going to just shotgun all this research and then write as much as I can and kind of then tailor it into what the final version is?
Yeah, I mean, the article went through 17 revisions, including at least one complete rewrite from beginning to end. And initially, it was almost entirely just a collection of quotes with very little commentary at all. It was just like, look at all these things he said, which was, compelling, but also, not exactly my voice. It was mostly just, David Silverman's voice. And so one of the major rewrites I did was, just adding in the context, like, here's why this concerns me. And here's what I'm worried about. So, but yeah, I mean, I spent a ton of time doing, looking up all of the things. And I had to listen to that Sargon of Akkad podcast 10 times all the way through to make sure that I was like accurately quoting things and not mischaracterizing, because I'm not interested in doing that, just the facts. So yeah, it took about, I think, 3 weeks, maybe a month to from start to finish.
Well, that's a lot of work.
It was a lot of sighing. There were a lot of really audible sighs.
Well, you mentioned that you tried to reach out to Gail Miller, who's the woman who hired him, or at least made the decision to hire him. And he was a super duper feminist, according to some people who defend David Silverman. So what was that like? Like, did you just kind of reach out, and did you just get a flat no, or was there any kind of statement behind that?
No, actually, so I reached out very shortly after I started writing the article, just with some very specific questions, mostly about AAI's position on social justice causes, right? And I was also interested in whether, I mean, their whole stated reason for hiring David was to bring more attention to what they're trying to do, right? Because he is obviously a very visible figure. Right, and so I was also curious about
well, then what are you trying to do?
Did that work? Has your membership increased since you hired him? At least 2 weeks went by and I didn't hear anything. I then did get an email back and she said, "Oh, I'd be very happy to answer your questions. Sorry it took so long." And then I just never heard anything. She had to have had a week or two between when she sent that email and when we went to press. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if she changed her mind or if there just wasn't enough time or what. So it seemed like they were interested in answering the questions, but just didn't do it.
You can't always say like, well, this person ducked you and just, oh, I bet they're getting a lot of attention because of that. And they probably thought they were going to get a lot more attention. And I wonder if it's because it's Atheist Alliance International. Maybe they're not paying attention to America as much. So maybe they didn't see the whole thing that happened with him. Or
you mean you mean the response to his hiring?
Well, I mean, just in actually researching him, because that's one thing people have brought up is like, did they actually do any background search? Like, this is like all the hirings for Trump's cabinet. Like, clearly there hasn't been a lot of background work done. And sadly, the comparisons do kind of add up from time to time. But yeah. I
mean, I'm very curious about whether, I think that they've kind of answered the question though, about whether or not they would be concerned about his statements by, he posted just a couple of days ago, I think in response to my article, although they didn't explicitly call it out, that he's very proud to work for an organization that's, what do you say, explicitly anti-wokeness or something like that. And it was shared on the AAI page. Now, it's possible that he shared it, but it's been there for, a couple of days now and nobody's taken it down. So it leads me to believe that, that's their official stance, is anti-wokeness, anti-social justice. I don't know what to do with that. That seems like that's an interesting. The thing that really is sad and upsetting to me is that it's not an unsupported stance. The number, it's concerning if one powerful guy says some things that I think are dangerous or harmful to people who are vulnerable. But it's another thing if this one guy says it and then he has a whole chorus of support, right? And that's what I think is really unfortunate, is that, it's a lot of people who I think in order for me to be able to do the work that I want to do and see the world that I want to see, like I have to try to change their minds. That's a lot. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, there's something to be said. Is he creating a narrative, or is he just taking an existing narrative? Clearly, that's the case with this, and clearly this conversation requires a little dragon's milk. So live beer open on camera, which I don't know if I've done before. So I'll quote a line from the story. And I don't know how to heal the rift in the movement without abandoning the values that attracted me to it in the first place. So this leads me to a question. What do you think of this great rift in atheism between the anti-woke and the woke, even though those terms don't necessarily fit, but clearly there's a polarization that's happened?
I have more thoughts about it than I can articulate. I think everything that I've seen that's anti-wokeness, I just can't, I don't understand where it's coming from, except to say that it's, it seems to, a lot of the comments on my article were the effect of, well, you just want to flip the power hierarchies. You want to take all the power away from white men because you hate them, and you want to give it all to people of color and queer people. And that's it's reverse discrimination, essentially, right? And what I hear in that comment is like fear and pain, to be really extra empathetic about it. Like, I mean, there's research that shows that loss of privilege feels exactly like oppression, right? It's disturbing. I work with this man who is a Rush Limbaugh Republican. And, although he was at first a never Trumper before the election, he is now a fully committed Trump supporter. And I remember when gay marriage was, when the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage could be a thing, right? And that day he was so sad. He felt just devastated because to him, like, his deeply held belief is that being gay is wrong, and not just, wrong on a personal level, but it's going to harm the fabric of society, that it's like dangerous and it's going to destroy the world that he loves. And like, obviously I totally disagree with him, but he felt like super silenced, right? Because he's not allowed to say that anymore. That's like without being called a bigot or, suffering some kind of reprisal, right? And he was genuinely wounded. And I think that that's kind of where this anti-wokeness position is coming from, right? This real sense that, like, I'm being silenced. Nobody's allowed to disagree anymore, right? I mean, one of the things that it keeps coming up is like, social justice warriors are authoritarian, right? They silence dissent. Their anti-enlightenment principles is another one.
Anti-West probably will come up. I wonder where that is coming from.
I've seen that one too.
Keep asking, like, where do these things come from? Let's think about this a little bit.
Well, I mean, the thing is like, okay, so it's a big conversation right now, right? Like ideological purity and cancel culture. Mm-hmm. These are things that, like, even Obama has decided to now chime in on. So it's like part of a larger conversation. And, I think you have to ask yourself, like for this guy that I work with, like, that is his individual pain. Like, how does that compare? How does that hold up to the systemic pain that gay people felt being not allowed to marry, right? And like, which one of these, while all feelings are valid and important, right? Which one of these is like, which one is one that we should put our energy into? And for me, like, because I do believe that, there's systemic oppression, like, I'm kind of done investing my energy in the feelings of white men. Like, not on an individual level. Like, I'm very supportive of white men that I love and care about,
Oh no. That means all white men are down on the
Yes, I hate all white men.
I mean, ultimately, I don't know, is it one of those compromises where everybody's unhappy? Like, isn't the point for people who have privilege to actually for a moment go, oh, so that's what it's like to not have this kind of privilege? Instead, they're like you say, equality means they're being oppressed.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that discomfort is part of the gig. Like, being an ally, working in social justice is inherently, if you are really actually being an activist, it's uncomfortable, especially if you are in a position of privilege, right? I'm a white person, and in my organizations that I work with, like, I get it wrong. I can't get it right because I have blind spots just because, like, I walk through the world with white skin. And, I want people in my life to tell me, ooh, you fucked that up. That was racist. Or that was some internalized misogyny shit right there, right? And it sucks to hear that. Like, I'm not trying to say, like, it's fine. It doesn't, I'm impervious to it. It sucks. It's like, oh shit. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to feel that, right? But, like, that's the moment that matters right there, is do I take that discomfort and push it outward, right? Oh, I'm uncomfortable. You've done something wrong. You have called me a bad person, or, you've called me a bigot, and I don't have a racist bone in my body, or, like, that's pushing those feelings away. Or do I sit with them and go, maybe there's something to that. Like, what can I learn from that bad feeling? And I think, there's this I think that's part of the rift, is, like, sitting, like, there's the people who are, like, willing to sit with those feelings, or maybe just more skilled at it. I don't really know. I don't necessarily think it's, like, an inherent ability or whatever. And people who struggle with that, people who, like, I went through this bad thing and therefore women are all bad, right? As opposed to, like, I went through this bad thing and it fucking sucked, and, like, what am I going to learn now other than women are all bad? And I think that, let me add too, that I think that, when social justice warriors, when the progressive left is accused of, like, thinking we're more moral than other people, I think what that comes down to is this idea that if you do a racist thing, or you say a racist thing or a misogynistic thing, and somebody calls you out, that, like, they're saying you're a bad person, or that you're inherently immoral, or, anything like that. And I just don't think that that's true. I mean, I think that where you become a bad person or you become immoral is if you refuse to interrogate your own internal biases. You refuse to engage with them, and you immediately push all of that away and onto someone else, and allow, that just propagates these structures that are in place that allow people to continue to be oppressed.
Yeah, I do think it's really, really hard to examine something as complicated as this is when emotions are involved, but it's so easy for emotions to be involved, and it's so easy to make this thing into a polarizing situation. And it's never, like, the intention. Whenever I brought this up initially, I mean, the initial thing was just asking podcast hosts, like, why are you having Silverman on? And then it became, like, this major personal issue, and it got really bad. And it just was this question, like, why is this guy worthy of talking about? I know he's a great interview, and he's going to tell you whatever you want to hear, and he's going to tell great stories and good narratives and all that. But just having that voice on, what about the people who are listening who are like, oh, so that means stuff that happened to me doesn't matter because this other person has this voice? And, people think that has to be heard, but then the people who are victimized don't usually get to speak. And if they do, they get attacked. Like, I mean, you said you had, I don't know if you'd say 50-50 positive, negative reactions to what happened to you, but that still had to be a little tough to hear. I don't know. How was it to get that kind of feedback? Because you had to expect you were going to get that, right? From the article?
You mean in the comments on the article?
Yeah, the comments, or even maybe you got stuff from Facebook or other places.
Like, to be totally honest, like, because I've followed the MRA community to some extent, I was expecting it to be way worse than it was, because Silverman has been kind of, like, rubbing elbows with some real MRAs at this point, and often, like, you look at Gamergate or Elevatorgate, and, like, the responses to those were so vitriolic and scary and death threaty, and, like, I don't think I'm necessarily, like, important enough to warrant any of that stuff, but I was scared of it. And so, like, the fact that the comments on the article are wildly disagreeing, and in some places insulting of me, they're mostly, like, at least attempting in a discourse with each other. And I've got people who are sticking up for me in the comments too. So that's always, so, it honestly, like when I got the first negative comment, then I felt like relieved because it was like, okay, like if somebody cares enough about this to be mad about it, then like it's reaching people. And like, that's the status, the worst thing to me would have been if like just nobody gave a shit. Because this is an important issue to me. And if I wrote about it and nobody gave a shit, like, oh, bummer. I worked real hard. It happens, but sucks. So
well, it's fine. People definitely gave a shit. And yeah, you do get this like, oh no, YouTube comments, never check the YouTube comments. I don't get a lot of them. Occasionally that'll happen. But there were terms that were used in like Silverman's response, if it was a response to you, that you wanted to talk about. And I figured I would just throw out the term and then you could say, well, just say whatever you want to say about it. It's like, off the top of your head.
I love this carte blanche thing. This is great.
Yeah, I like to leave it open. So either virtue signal or virtue signaling. It's the same.
Yeah, so like one of the things that he said was that like we're just virtue signaling for profit or personal gain, that this is all about like just a demonstration for other people, right? And like I just fundamentally do not understand that, because like first of all, there's risk associated with taking public positions, right? Just like I think that people who are mad about being called bigots or racist in the public eye, like they don't recognize that like on the flip side, the people doing the calling out, they're taking a risk too. Because like I've gotten shit on for being public with these views because they're not popular to everybody. And so like there's emotional risk there. And also like, I don't know, man, I'm doing so much hard work. This is not easy. I am like, I really deeply care about this stuff. And, I just don't understand. I just don't understand the whole idea of virtue signaling. And I don't know what personal gain I'm supposed to get. Like, I spend, I volunteer with the FHA. It's not paid. I probably spent, oh my God, that article probably took me 60 hours to write. I didn't get paid for it, and I did it because I care. Because I like, it matters to me. And I don't know, like the only thing I can gain from visibility is like more attention to these things that I care about. The more people I reach, the more people I can get working on it, right? Like, for example, pitch, the FHA needs more members. We need more people on our board so that we can like complete our missions, which are about increasing, helping the AHA. It's about making our side of the movement fluffier and more welcoming and safe to people from marginalized groups, right? Because, as I mentioned in my article, even in the AHA, the yearly conference, the membership is really largely older white men. And not that there's anything like inherently wrong with older white men, but it's not, as Amanda Marcotte pointed out in her article.
Time to say, okay, boomer. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's not a good representation of like the makeup of humanity. And there are people of color who are atheists, and there are LGBTQIA people who are atheists, and like I want them to feel welcome in this community. I think that's important. I don't think that they should be excluded for no good reason. And so like we're working to make this movement more inclusive. And all of these organizations are a nonprofit. So I don't know what the profit is. I've never made any sweet atheist money at all. I don't know. All of the personal gain is just in like hopefully seeing the world get better. Which sounds so Pollyanna. I swear I'm not. Let me shotgun my cider.
So I don't. It's never a terrible thing to want. The first time I heard virtue signaling, I was like, well, that's a cute term. And I thought, oh, is this just a projection thing? Because usually it's basically in that statement where it was like, oh, virtue signaling is bad. He's virtue signaling to his followers, to the people who agree with him, that being anti-whatever social justice is good. So by saying it, you're kind of doing it too. So it just, usually it defeats the purpose. But the term,
everything that's done publicly is signaling something to someone, right? Or you just wouldn't do it publicly, right? So it's I mean, and I don't, if I'm going to signal something, I'd prefer that it were virtue. Like, honestly, like, even if, like, on the very most basic level, I was doing zero social justice work at all, and I was just acting like I'm very social justice-y, and like, you know, signaling all those virtues, like, good, fine. Like, isn't that better than just being a shithead and, like, you know, going out there and saying women are bad and terrible and liars and I'm going to oppress more people? I don't get it.
I mean, it's kind of like the attack on social justice. Like, you have to explain it because, like, you seem like you're saying, wait, do you mean social justice is bad? No, it's people who do it badly. It's like, oh, so you mean you hate extremism? Okay, me too. You know,
We can
and you know what?
that.
Isn't it a good thing when people point out the bad? This is like stuff I get when I'm like bring up the atheists behaving badly. The fact that these usually white atheist leaders have been accused of things and keep getting more and more chances. And then people get mad because you point it out. It's like, well, who's going to point out bad behavior in a community first, then the people in the community? And is that a bad thing? And if it is, why? Because when it happens in other communities, you get mad. But it's not okay in ours. But that's, I don't know, that's not a unique thing to atheism. That's every community. Because you have this thing you identify with. And then when something bad happens, you're like, crap, that means I'm bad. And it's like, probably, but not totally. Anyway, I'm getting off. See, I'm getting off course too. It's so easy to go on those tangents. But the key word, the whole reason why we're in here tonight, intersectionality.
Intersectionality. That's me filleting it. Because for people who didn't see David Silverman's
On the
comment,
video thing, you're clearly missing out. This is a reason why no one under the age of like 35 should ever watch these videos. So go ahead. Please continue.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that David Silverman said in his most recent post was that we're all just filleting intersectionality or whatever the new woke fad is. That might not be a direct quote, but it's very close. And the filleting intersectionality part is definitely a direct quote. Yes, I am all in favor of filleting the idea that, like, we should think about our relative positions in society and, like, account for those in our interactions. You got me.
I mean, in one of the interviews with David Silverman, he complained that the American atheists at their convention didn't have any ex-Muslims. And I probably could look up and see that they did, but that sounds like intersectionality, having different groups together. I mean, that's the point. Like, that's the thing with atheism is that, like, you mentioned the leadership as being like white male. Well, if you're exclusively white male, okay, that's more than other groups, but that's still very limiting. And you don't want to be limited. You want the pool to be as deep as possible, especially since people think we don't exist and political characters totally ignore us. So yeah, it seems like you want that. And if you don't want that, then I guess you're Gavin McInnes, you're a Proud Boy. I don't know. You're a white nationalist. I don't know. What are you then? I
don't know. I mean, I think it does. I might be giving too much credit here, but I think it does come down to, like, a disagreement about methodology, right? I mean, even in the people in my comments are saying things like, oh, everybody thinks social justice is great. It's just, you know, and I think that, you know, people are very concerned about silencing dissent, right? That seems to be, like, one of the main complaints about progressive leftists is that we silence dissent and cancel culture and things like that. And I mean, first of all, like, think about climate change. There's no way at this point to make a good faith argument that climate change is not, like, a result of human activity and dangerous and something we need to do something about. You can make that argument, but it's not a good faith argument. There's just too much, you know, there's a preponderance of the evidence. And so, like, generally, we shut that down, like, people shut that down pretty quickly. It's like, you're gonna try to make that argument, I'm not gonna engage with you on it because it's just pointless. Like, go do your research, you know. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, like, I feel the same way about identity politics, right? About like, you know, patriarchy is a thing and systemic racism is a thing. And I'm just not generally willing to entertain arguments that they're not, right? And so it's not intended to like, there was a meme going around about how, you know, it's all fine and good to say that everybody, you know, you should have discourse about everything and whatever. But if you're in a science lab doing like advanced research and somebody runs in and says like, I don't believe in atoms, like all of the, you know, highly educated scientists shouldn't stop what they're doing to explain atoms to this one guy. Like that's going to actually halt the progress of the science. And so this guy needs to be dismissed and told to go like read a fucking book, you know, and educate himself. And I think that that's kind of the turning point that we're at right now is, you know, in a lot of ways, it's like, I'm sorry, like this stuff is real. It's very obviously real. It's not just anecdotal. It's like a collection of anecdotes. You know, people like dismiss like lived experience as anecdotal, but when you have, you know, so many people talking about their lived experience being a certain way, right? So like lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people of color say like, I get followed around gas stations, or, you know, police are very threatening and, you know, murdery to me. Like we can take that as evidence. It's not just anecdotal. Yeah. And so I find it very difficult to like argue with people who are like going to try to argue about that. And so I can understand like this idea of silencing dissent, but I don't know what the answer to that is, because I do feel like all the information is there. And, you know, cancel culture, tell me one person who's been canceled. Just tell me one person who like has actually been canceled.
Oh,
like,
who was the Kathy Griffin, the comedian who did the chopping Trump's head off? Like she couldn't get work. Weird. She's on the left though. I thought only people in the people who get canceled are the ones who are doing like the 8-figure deals with Netflix. Yeah. You know, like, David Chappelle is getting, it's like, the dude just got like $80 million. That's the opposite of canceled.
It's going to be okay.
Plus, it's like, it's okay for people with the right to say, I don't like this content, so I'm not going to consume it. Like, that's capitalism right there. Right. So I thought capitalism was good for most Americans. I think our commies like Chris might not disagree with that. But, you know, like if you think it's good, then the fact that people have the right to say no to content is fine. And that's what happens. And that's what we would hope, you know, that the good ideas would win and the bad ideas would lose, but that's not necessarily the case. And the funny thing is, the next term I was going to say was cancel culture or call it culture, and you already got to it. See, the best guests don't even have access to my show notes. It's weird. I'm very transparent. It's like right there. It's out. I put it into the universe and you grabbed it.
It's just my extreme empathy. That's what it is.
That must be it.
Read it on your face. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like, we are in a unique moment where, you know, I think that like social pressure has always been used to tell people what society is willing to accept and what it's not, across all times and all cultures. Like that is, ask any anthropologist, like that's how it works. But in this moment, like because of the internet and, you know, Twitter, like where you used to have like your village of 100 people were really pissed off at you for cheating on your wife. Like now the entire world sees that. And so it's a different kind of pressure. I think it's the same thing, but it is on a larger scale. And so I think it does feel differently, whether or not it has like a different, you know, I don't know what to do with that. You know, I don't know if it makes it worse, or I don't know if we need to like somehow scale it back or whatever. But I mean, I don't think that social pressure is new. It's just on a bigger scale now.
Well, I'm going to do something that's going to blow the mind of the chat room. Jeannie, I'm actually going to ask a question you posted in the chat room a while back, but I wanted it to be the right time. And now, well, I'm saying it's the right time because I'm a bully pulpit and it's time. So what would you say, Krista, would be a just outcome for David Silverman?
Oh, I saw that come up. I'm glad you asked. Yeah. So I'm happy that you asked, because I do think that like one of the things that we haven't exactly figured out yet, as far as, you know, cancel culture and the Me Too movement, is like what does a redemption arc look like? What should it look like? You know, what's a proper apology look like? You know, I mean, a lot of times, like, people apologize.
If you want what not a proper apology is, pretty much the last 3 months of David Silverman.
Yes, I agree with you on that. Yeah, so a just outcome, like, at this point, I don't know. I don't know at this point. I can't really talk about that. But if you want to talk about, like, what trajectory would I have liked to see, or would I have thought would be like a good redemption arc, like, after the allegations, whether they're true or not, well, maybe it does make a difference. I'm not really sure. But so, you know, apologies, just generally speaking, I'm not going to necessarily speak just to David, but just generally speaking, apologies should not be focused on the accused, right? It shouldn't be like, well, I was going through this and this and this, and, you know, I've learned, I'm much better than I was then. Or, I mean, it just should not be focused on the accused. It should be focused on the victim, because those are that's who suffered, right? There should be time away, right? Real introspection, real genuine introspection, learning, consuming media around, like, whatever abuse happened is, like, go read survivor stories, go, you know, stuff like that. Go to therapy. And, you know, honestly, I think that when you have violated public trust, then, you know, like with any trust relationship, the public gets to decide when they will trust you again. And I think, you know, you kind of have to let them do that. I mean, it might not be fair, and it might take longer than you think it should. But that's how I think it needs to go. And I just can't. One of the things that David Silverman was going around saying was, like, you know, this has been so terrible for me, I can't get a job. I have to be an insurance agent. And, like, you have a job. That's a job.
He said, like, I've been unemployed, but he didn't mention that it was, like, by choice. And then he had a job, and he had to say that immediately. And so the whole narrative died. And of course, the narrative of, oh, I can't get a job because of what happened, and then he instantly gets a job, that kind of takes away the whole, like, poor me aspect. And really, even if you feel poor me, you probably shouldn't say that.
No, well, and I think, I mean, honestly, like, I think it's like,
I mean, you can say, like, he did talk about, oh, I'm going to therapy, but he didn't use it as in, I went to therapy and here's what I learned, other than, oh, let me take these right-wing talking points and bludgeon people over the head with them.
Well,
you didn't see, like, did you go, like, what kind of therapist did you go to come up with this idea? I
think amends are important, right? Because, like, while, you know, public opinion is definitely a thing, like, everybody should be focused in a positive, supportive way on, like, the victims, the things, the people who have suffered. And so, you know, making amends should be part, and the amends that the victims want. Maybe they don't want any, that's their right. You know, maybe they just want to disappear from the public eye, that is also their right. But, you know, very few people try to make amends. And unfortunately, you know, a lot of people respond with defensiveness, you know, and I think that that's one of the big problems with, you know, the issues that we're seeing is just this defensiveness. I think it's, like, the number one thing that's preventing social progress is that individual defensiveness to these questions of, like, social justice and, you know, ideas about consent. And, you know, I mean, you have to be able to sit with that shitty feeling and do something positive with it.
Yeah, it's not easy, but you have positivity to share. So can you talk about the Leadership Council of the Feminist Humanist Alliance and your work with that?
Yeah, I can. So I've been with the FHA for 2 years, and our action plan last year, well, one of the things that we did last year, and we're doing again this year, I believe, pending budgeting, is providing scholarships to the American Humanist Association Conference for people from traditionally marginalized groups. And that, you know, that's especially exciting this year because it's the World Congress in Miami next August. Another thing that we are trying to get going is a social justice representative program to involve at individual chapters of the AHA, the American Humanist Association, to get social justice representative volunteers at individual chapters, so that we can kind of like open a line of communication between the AHA and the local chapters, specifically with a mind toward social justice concerns, right? Like helping connect people in their local areas with people already doing social justice work, groups that they can support or join with, helping resolve issues. I think I mentioned in the article, one of my the first FHA meeting I ever went to, at the AHA conference, there were like local chapter leaders saying like, please, can you help? There's so much casual sexism in our ranks. And it's, we don't know what to do, right? And so, a big part of social justice work is just educating people, like helping people to understand the world from different perspectives so that they can incorporate those perspectives into their own understanding of the world. And so, so like, we need more manpower. We're looking for leadership council members now. It's great to have the support of the AHA. They're totally a woke organization. I mean, woke is like not a good word anymore, but they're very social justice minded. And so they really invest time and energy in their social justice alliances. And I really appreciated that.
Well, if people can't hear what you're saying about what they're doing about social justice and take it as a negative, well, I mean, there's nothing I can do about that.
I don't know what to tell them.
Exactly. Now, usually at the end, I ask my guest about a special talent or to tell a joke, but I think in your case, I feel like I have a good question to ask you. So if you have a choice, would you adopt Quilty or the New York Giants cat? And if you don't know who the letter is, I can explain.
Yeah, you're going to have to explain. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I do not know the New York Giants cat.
On a Monday night football game, a cat got onto the field. This was at the New York Giants Stadium, and it's New York, but it's actually New Jersey. And this black cat got in the field, and it was on the field for like 5 minutes, and it finally left. And they actually couldn't find it. And people were saying, oh, they have all these feral cats in this because it's a giant complex. But they never found the cat. But the memes involving the cat, as Chris can say, are amazing. Because that cat was just running around the field and nobody could catch it. And it was this big black cat, and it had the "don't fuck with me" attitude. But you mentioned Quilty on your Facebook page. I think it was it was like a Houston adoption agency that mentioned this cat. And I think he's already been adopted, sadly. But if you want to tell Quilty's story, feel free.
Oh, happily he's been adopted. Quilty is just like an escape artist. And at the Humane Society that he was at, he could like legit open doors, and he would open doors and sneak out in the middle of the night and like let all of the senior cats out of their rooms. And he did get adopted. It is so funny that you say adopting a cat, because for two reasons. One, I actually just adopted a cat last weekend, and her name is Lucy. Okay. And I don't think I would want either Quilty or the New York Giants cat, because like she's like the hide and seek master, and it's so disconcerting to not be able to find our cat. And I feel like we'd have the same problem with a cat that runs and a cat that hides. The other reason is I actually had to put down our senior cat today at lunch.
Oh no!
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible. So thanks for bringing that up, man.
Yeah, I know. I've really brought up the good and the bad today. I'm like the worst host ever. It's like, it really is a super emotional thing, because with like a cat, you can just hire a stranger to come to your house and like kill your cat. Like we had two cats we took to the vet, and one we just had and she had like a van, and she just came to the house, killed the cat, took the body, game over. And it's like, it seems very transactional, but at the same time, it's like, we sometimes treat cats more humanistically than we do humans, because we know every time our cats are in that situation, like they are, the only life they have left is a very painful one. And you've given them such a great life that you know you have to let them go at a certain point. And it's just so hard because they live these short lives. I mean, the longest life we've had with a cat, 17 years. And you think 17 years, that's almost 3 of the lives I've had so far, and they just have so much happiness in their lives. So I'm sorry that happened. I know how painful that can be. Hopefully being on the show was the opposite, but I don't know right now. I'm not feeling that.
Yeah. Well, no, this was good. This was good. And it was time for him to go. So it was very sad at lunchtime today, but
Yeah.
We're getting better already. So
Well, if you have enough wherewithal left, where can people find you online or support the American Humanist Association or anything like that? And I'll include all links in the show notes.
yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think that the Feminist Humanist Alliance is, I think, feministhumanists.org. I am actually, so my website is, I might regret giving this out, but it's kristacox.me, M-E. And that is, I'm a poet, in my, I moonlight as a poet. So you can find my totally social justice-y poetry there. It's lots of like white man hating poetry. So that's great. Yeah. And, I think that'll do it. You can probably, I'm on Twitter at Blather Skype.
Okay, I'll include that. Okay, well, thank you, Krista, for being on tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me a chance to talk about stuff that I care about.
Exactly. Okay.
You're beautiful. Oh, somebody's in love. That means you'll have to be neutered.
Live read. Today is the Transgender Day of Remembrance, November 20th, 2019. Gwendolyn Ann Smith, a graphic designer, columnist, and LGBT rights activist, chose November 20th to commemorate the murder of Rita Hester, a transgender African-American woman who was killed in Allston, Massachusetts. Your trans friends, family, and fellow humans can't hide who they are, the way a white dude living in a Christian America can. If you want to support this show, and who doesn't, be like Larry, Daryl, the other Daryl, Bobby, Ashley, Teody, Hugh, I'll never tell you how old you are, no one would believe it, Man, Chris, they would believe how old you are, Watson, Alan Marks, and Freethinker215, I'll never run out of Simpsons quotes. Go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege. Follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all mail and cocktail recipes to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thanks to Krista Cox for being on this week. In a very new end-of-show segment, let's try something a little different. I'm going to try to use some excellent advice from a religious figure that could be taken out of context, and by that, I mean the bedroom. This week from St. Francis of Assisi, it's in giving that you receive. Just next week, I will have on Marie de l'Elefant to discuss Everyone's Autonomous. Until then, let's continue the conversation.